my name's Tim Westbrook, and I love being sober. The one thing I love almost as much as being sober is hearing stories about other people being sober. My dream with this podcast is to have people call the I Love Being Sober line to share their story of how they heard something on the show that helped them or a family member get clean and sober. Today, I'm here with Carey Davidson. Carey is an internationally certified advanced drug and alcohol counselor, board-registered intervention specialist, certified Arise Interventionist, and a certified intervention professional. Carey entered the behavioral health field out of his sincere desire to help others. He holds a master's degree from the esteemed Hazelden Graduate School of Addiction Studies. Carey was formerly the president of the Network of Independent Interventionists and sat on the Arizona Board of Certification of Addiction Counselors. He was among the founding board members of the Therapeutic Consultants Association and is a current member of the Association of Intervention Specialists. He grew up the son of a prominent minister and was a rising star in the television advertising industry right out of his undergraduate university studies. He's an example of how even the best of homes or a high-profile career offers no immunity from addiction. His personal experiences in sobriety, relapse, and recovery provide an extraordinary insight into recovery and the addictive mindset. Carey is trained in all modalities of intervention and practices only proven intervention methods, implementing the best combination of techniques for each individual intervention he performs or when providing supervision for other interventionists. Carey is a master at guiding concerned families, friends, and loved ones through the intervention process. His focus and passion are helping people who care about someone struggling with substance abuse or other maladaptive coping issues. His communication skills, experience, and insight have proven to be invaluable assets when working with those involved. Carey is focused on education and empowering those who have been impacted by substance abuse, addiction, dual diagnosis issues, and process disorders. Carey, welcome to the show. I'm grateful to have you here.
Gosh, Tim, that we're gonna have to work on that introduction. I had it about that was way long. Thanks for having me.
I mean, it's good stuff though. But yeah, if you want to cut a few things out, you can. But regardless, it's all. I mean, it tells everybody who you are and why you're an expert in the field.
Okay.
And it gives your credentials. So I think it's important. So today we're going to talk about interventions. We're going to talk about what is an intervention, why do an intervention, the myths and realities of interventions, what it takes to be an interventionist, and why families are stuck. And before we start talking about interventions, I'd like to hear a little about your journey to recovery, Carey.
Of course, and I love being sober too. I am a person in long-term recovery. I have 18 consecutive years coming up on here in a week of being a person in recovery. And I tell you what, life is good. It's a lot better now than I ever dreamed. So, I went through my struggles. I didn't raise my hand in fifth grade and say, hey, I wanted to be an alcoholic when I grow up. But, there's a genetic link. There's a learned reasons. And, the bottom line is drinking felt good. And I liked doing it, but I crossed that line into where I could no longer control it. And, it's kind of like juggling Jello. I was able to keep them up in the balls in the air and be a successful drinker until I couldn't. And ultimately I ended up, I had a great career, great track. And ultimately I ended up losing almost everything as a result of my drinking. Went through a number of rehabs, a number of relapses, and just blessed to have the life in recovery I have now, and to help people.
Yeah. And how did you? So, I guess briefly, I don't really want to dig too much into your story. But how did it start for you? How did the drinking, can you give me a quick version of how did it start and then how did it progress? And when did you know you had a problem?
Well, it started with going out on the weekends and having fun in high school,
Okay.
and having kegers and things like that, and evolved into heavier drinking when I went to undergrad college. And then when I got into the workforce, I was in a sales type position, and drinking was somewhat acceptable and going out with clients. And so I found clients that like to drink, and that's who I took out the most. And, over time it became my passion. That's what I was all about, getting through the day, getting to the point to where I could drink. And at the end, I couldn't control it. Just couldn't control it. It was, the first thing I had to do in the morning, and wasn't employable. And through the help of my family and others, I was able to go to treatment, get back and get into a lifestyle of recovery.
And how long did it take before it became a problem?
Let's see. I knew I liked it too much in high school. Mm-hmm. And so I spent my 30th birthday in a residential treatment program, and then about another 5 years of in and out of treatment and support recovery groups, 12-step groups, relapsing until finally I hit a bottom, is what we call, but a place that I could no longer deny the problem was my drinking, and I needed to address it.
Okay. And then you ended up going to treatment. Now, were there multiple stints in treatment centers?
Yes, I was one of those guys that I got sober, life started getting good, and then I didn't need to do what I did to get there. So I slacked off, and then, it's very typical. It's a great obsession of every person with a alcohol or drug problem, is that they can drink or drug like a normal person. Mm-hmm. Not everybody that drinks has problems with it, but those that do need to address it. And, it's kind of like being a diabetic. You have to manage it and learn how to do things different in a different way. Otherwise, I agree with the American Medical Association when they call it a disease. But just like diabetes, it's manageable.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And so how did you end up getting into the work? Because you work in the field now, you're an interventionist. And how did, from getting sober to working in the field, how'd that happen?
Well, my family tried. The reason I do what I do is my family tried to do an intervention on me. And, and it was done by somebody that had their own personal recovery experience, but they didn't have any real formalized training. So I, shucked and jived and dodged my way through it and said, I'll go, there's only 3 weeks left in ski season. I'll go right after that. I got out of the challenges. The person that intervened on me had one tool, which was a hammer, and they tried to get me in that way. And it didn't work. My family had the power. They just weren't guided in the right direction. So after an incredible, what we call the bottom, losing everything, I was about year in recovery, year and a half in recovery. And I realized, had that been a properly orchestrated intervention, my family wouldn't have had to have gone through what they went through. And I probably could have been in recovery a lot sooner. So I started Googling, looked around, and found out that anybody can print up a card doing interventions. So that's what I did. And went out, started handing out my cards saying I do interventions, self-read what I could. And that's how I got started. Okay.
And so I guess even before we go further, let's tell everybody what is an intervention?
Well, I should probably back up just a second and say, I printed up cards and started doing interventions. Uh-huh. And then I started getting in and realizing that I was getting in situations beyond my experience, strength, and hope and self-teaching. Okay. So I went back to school, got a master's degree in counseling and addiction studies at Hazelden Betty Ford, and came back into the field doing interventions from a place of education and knowledge. And so I guess the point of the story is anybody can print up a card. Be careful out there.
Right. Yeah. I mean, so you got into doing interventions and you went back to school, you got your master's, you're educated now. What was the difference between doing interventions with your own experience, strength, and hope? I'm sure you had really good intentions. And then after becoming educated, like what was the difference?
Well, I think the big difference is when I was doing them, I really, without the formal education, I was really using my own personal experience, strength, and hope in an effort to get people into treatment. But the tool I had was a hammer. If you don't go to treatment, then this is what's going to happen to you, and we're just going to destroy your life and make sure that everything we possibly can do will make it tough in order for you to force you into treatment. So after I went to school, I learned therapeutic modalities. I gained insight into the human psyche, and I learned a lot of clinical skills that I could utilize over the course of an intervention and working with families. Because addiction, if you have a family, addiction is it's a family disease. It impacts everybody. So the way I work now is looking at the family and working with the family and the person that's struggling in order to have total family change and healing.
Right. And I know a lot of people think that little Johnny has the problem. I don't have the problem. But really, to your point, it's the whole family.
Mm-hmm. It is. A lot of times families are trying to make rational sense out of someone with an addiction, substance use disorders, irrational thinking, and it, denial of the problem, the minimization of problems, the lying, the partial truths, the manipulations of family members, the person that's struggling. It's crazy making for the family. It's like there's two people in one body: the person that they know, and then the addict that will do anything to get fed, regardless of how it impacts people that love them.
Right. Now, is the show Intervention, is that an accurate depiction of an intervention?
I have a love-hate relationship with that show. Okay. I love it because it gives family hope, and it shows that they can take some action in helping someone they care about that's struggling with addiction. The hate factor of the show is that it really doesn't show the work that goes into a properly orchestrated family intervention, nor does it show the ongoing support, education, therapy that's needed for everybody in the family system. So it lets people know that they can get help, but it doesn't, I don't think, accurately depict a true process.
Right. What is the so we'll talk about the myths and the reality. Tell me about the reality. Like, what does an intervention process look like?
Well, intervention process usually would be if families reached a point where they're ready for change. Mm-hmm. So for us, intervention, and I have a team that works with me. And for us, it's a lot of information gathering. The premise under which I work is the family knows the patient, and if we can gather the information, we're going to be able to put together a plan that's going to help everyone. So it's information gathering based upon the information, looking at what's a good treatment match, because I don't believe in cookie cutter treatment. I try and match treatment facilities with the patient's need. I'm completely independent. If someone is aligned with the treatment center, they're going to be paid to take that person to the referring treatment center. I'm very, very clear that I'm compensated by the family. Otherwise, it's kind of like an ambulance being paid by a hospital. Anybody gets injured, they got to take them to their hospital. So we do the the treatment planning and placement, do an actual lot of phone and electronic. Then we do a prep and planning meeting, then actually meeting with the patient themselves. And, you know, a lot of my interventions aren't that surprise, but it's not your birthday.
Yeah.
A lot of them are, you know, like, hey, that's what I think that a lot of what the show depicts. But what we do is we can actually invite someone and say, hey, we're going to have a family meeting with a therapeutic consultant and figure out, or you don't say interventionist necessarily, but figure out what we're going to do to help you. So by the time we meet with the patient, everybody knows what we're going to do based upon what is the need is and the response might be. So then usually about 85% of the people I work with go to treatment the day of the intervention. And then about 97% of the people I work with end up getting help. So it's very, very powerful.
Yeah, that's really good. So how does somebody know, like, when is the time? Like, okay, now is the time. I really think I need to call an interventionist. I've tried everything. I can't do it on my own. Should somebody try a couple of times on their own first? Or should they, like, is it ever too early to call an interventionist? Like, what does that look like?
Well, you know, it's usually family members that we're working with. So it's if alcohol or drugs are causing problems in a person's life, then they have an alcohol or drug problem. Mm-hmm. You know, so if the family member's like, hey, all these problems are happening and we're seeing it as a result of substance abuse, ask the person to get help. Because, it's no fun being in the grips of an active addiction. It's, in fact, it starts off as fun, but after a while, it's compulsive and it rules your life. So if problems are being caused by substance abuse, ask the person to get help. If they refuse to accept help or reject the help and the problems continue, then it would be a good time to consider moving forward with an intervention. Sadly, the average length of time that somebody's been struggling before they reach out for help is, family-wise, is about 7 years. So there's some people that get on it sooner. There's some people that take more time, but it really is about how much suffering can they handle, how much pain can they tolerate before they say, hey, time out, we can't do this anymore. Something's got to give.
Right. Okay, so once somebody calls you and they go through the intervention process, and they get someone to treatment, and then is it over?
Well, there's different types of interventionists. I'm unique in the way we operate. We stick with families anywhere 6 months, 12 months, sometimes even longer. Because getting a person, the hardest thing I tell families that are working with, that I'm working with, or somebody that's going into treatment, is people go to treatment, they come out better, but they don't come out fixed. So there's a lot of work that goes into recovery, as we call it. After you get sober, cleaned up, into recovery, you're going to have your year of firsts. Usually it's your first New Year's without drinking, going to a first wedding without drinking, your first birthday, holiday. There's all kinds of things. First bad day that you don't go home and, numb it out. So it's a lot of it is we support the family and concerned others and the person for a period of time after they get out of treatment. So that's important. We don't do the coaching. There's a lot of solid coaches out there. We don't do the sober lit transitional care. There's a lot of people that really do need and would benefit from a transitional program. Just like, not everybody does it. So we're always gearing people for, easing back into their lives rather than being in a protective bubble of a treatment center and then going right back into life. Not possible for everybody, but you got to have an exit plan that provides support and professionals.
And what would you say would be the success rate between somebody that goes to treatment and then cuts it off versus somebody that goes to treatment and then they they continue support with you, with a case manager, sober living, alumni program, and they stay connected for a longer period of time, for let's say 6 months to a year to 2 years.
You know, it's a lot like going to the gym, which I need to start doing. It's, you know, you gain new muscles in treatment, and you got to exercise them. And you know, the more you exercise, the more coaching you have, the more support, the proper therapy, the proper eating, the more muscles you're going to get. However, the most recent study I read was that the minimum a person should be in a therapeutic environment for the optimum to even expect a healthy long-term outcome is 90 days. Okay. 6 months is better. A year is even better. And unfortunately, not everybody can do it. But if you really want to hedge your bet, as they say, transitional living can make the difference between life and death for a lot of people.
Right. And one of the questions is, why are families stuck?
You know, there's a lot of myths around addiction. That's a complex, we could do like 5 hours on why families are stuck. But a lot of it is there's a lack of understanding around the disease model of addiction. You know, enabling is love, but when the addiction is in charge and not the real person, and someone's helping someone they love, they're assisting the addiction. There's also some shame and guilt that goes along with a lot of family members. They don't know what to do. I know I'm helping them, but I can't stop. I can't let them live on the street, that kind of thing. And probably the biggest myth out there is that a person has to want help in order to be helped. That's just not true. All a person has to do is take that first step. You know, we hear about people hitting bottom. Well, what I've learned over the last 15 years of doing interventions is that a person hits bottom when they quit digging.
Right.
And the families can help take the shovel away if they're properly guided. The families can throw them a rope and pull them out. But there's a lot of shame, a lot of misunderstanding, and normal love, compassion, empathy for someone that's going to lie, cheat, and steal to get what they want just doesn't work.
Right. It's kind of like bringing the bottom up to wherever they're at, right? Creating the bottom.
It's exactly what an intervention is saying, you know what? You're on this elevator that's going down. We're stepping in. We're going to give you an opportunity to get off the elevator, and we're going to hug you and love you and walk you through it.
You know, what I see time and time again, I can't even tell you how many times I've seen this. A parent has a son or a daughter that's active in their addiction, and they're not willing to put him out on the streets. They're like, I'm not doing it. I'm not willing to put him out on the streets. I would rather him be safe in my home. And if he's going to continue drinking and doing drugs and doing meth and whatever, like, at least I know that he's still alive. It's like, yeah. How do you have that convert? Because that person's not even going to call an interventionist. They're just going to continue. And I can see it. I've seen it. I can't even tell you. I'm thinking of a woman right now. Every time I've seen her over the last couple of years, her son lives at home. He's still in his addiction, but she's like, I'm not going to make him live on the streets.
Yeah. Well, you know, that's kind of the hammer method that I was talking about. Right. You know, come barging in like and a lot of people that aren't trained in clinic and don't have clinical skills, that's what they're going to say. Well, if he's not going to get better, do what we tell him to do, kick him out. It doesn't have to be that way. If he had cancer, you wouldn't kick him out on the street. I mean, if you believe it at all in the disease model of addiction, kicking someone out on the street, it's like cancer. Oh, so it's not okay. But what we can do is look at different ways that we can fine tune, make adjustments, and start creating change that will lead to that person that's struggling to change. So it's everybody's unique and individual and unique and individual. But when we're looking at, hey, we're going to kick you out if you don't do, you know what? There might be a lot of other things we could do to help motivate someone in new and different ways than just kicking them to the curb.
I think you bring up a really good point there. It's, it's like, although letting them continue living at home might be considered enabling, I mean, the reality is that that person, they don't know what to do. They don't know what to do. And that's why you call an interventionist. That's when it's time to call an interventionist. That's when it's time to call a professional, somebody that can help you and give you some guidance and help get, bring the bottom up to the top. Yeah. Help them stop digging. Like, go ahead. I was just going to say, let's strategize. Let's figure this out. It's like, you've been doing this for how many years?
15.
You've been doing it, and we'll get into that. What makes an interventionist qualified, and what questions should someone ask when searching for an interventionist? But I think the point is that, like, if your son or daughter or loved one is continuing to actively drink and use, like, you got to do something.
The worst thing you can do is nothing. If nothing changes, nothing changes. Mm-hmm. And addiction is a progressive disease. It will get worse if left untreated. So you're right. You got to do something, Tim.
Right. So when someone decides they're ready to start, even if they're just going to start exploring, right? Like, how does one go and find a good interventionist?
Well, I always say be wary of the internet. In one of the treatment centers I went to, it had pictures of guys and gals in a canoe, and there wasn't a lake for 75 miles in any direction. So what you see online is not always what you get in person. So I think some of the key questions to ask is, what's your education? Number one, what models of intervention do you use? Some people say, well, there's a lot of 3-day trainings, 2 and weekend trainings. Goes, oh, I'm this and that. I went through this training, and I'm in recovery. Well, being in recovery is great. Going through a weekend training is great, but there's a lot more. I mean, when a person is doing an intervention, they have family relationships that could be damaged for the rest of their lives if it's not a properly orchestrated intervention. So it's okay. Ask for references. Ask for who have they been working with. What treatment centers do you work with? Who have you worked with? What's your niche? What are you specialized in? What do you do if a person won't go when we ask them to go? How long do you stick with us after the intervention, and what does that look like? I mean, even though I'm trained as a therapist, I don't do therapy. I refer out to therapists and provide oversight. So I don't think any one person can do everything. But like they say, it takes a village, and it takes a village for someone to get better in recovery. So those are some of the basic questions. And, of course, also asking how they get paid and who pays them is a big thing too.
Right. Yeah. It's just finding a treatment center, finding an interventionist, finding a recovery coach. It's like, those are all things that if you're not in the treatment world, it's daunting. And the internet is, you never really know what you're going to get. So it's referrals, talking to people that talking to people that have had successful experiences with interventionists, with treatment centers. It's all about referrals, in my experience.
Well, and I'll never, someone said this once and it kind of always burned in my brain. So if there's one key point, I would say, here it is. A lay person works from personal experience. A professional will work from empirically evidence-based theories and modalities. That's a lot, huh? Big words.
Yeah.
So, someone who has experience and the training, I mean, that's something else to look for.
Mm-hmm. What would you say is a successful intervention?
A successful intervention is change.
Okay.
That is a successful intervention. Most of the time when I'm working, the change moves in a positive direction. Sometimes the change for some people might be positive. Sometimes it might be negative, but it's about change. I was working with a family once, and we were doing an intervention on a 40-year-old professional man. And by the time we got done with all of our family meetings and meeting with him, 4 other family members ended up going to treatment and realizing they needed help too. That was wow.
Wow. Right.
I mean, not, but it's through education and experience and through, real transparency and saying, here's what it is we're dealing with. And going back again, if, drugs or alcohol are causing problems in your life, then you might want to look at your drug and alcohol problem.
Right. Right. What suggestions do you have for anybody that is looking to hire an interventionist?
Well, even if they don't hire, or for concerned others, is that what you're
like top 3? Like somebody has a son, a daughter, a husband, a wife. Like what's your suggestion? I mean, it's like they're lost. What do they do? Like where should they start? What are the top 3 things they should do?
Well, number 1, I always suggest to ask the person that's struggling if they're willing to get help. I mean, it's always amazing when I'm talking with the family member, something's been going on for 3 years, and I'll say, hey, have you asked them if they're willing to get help? Well, no. They're scared. I don't want them to be mad at me. Well, that's the first thing.
Yeah, that's the obvious first thing is ask them, right?
Yeah.
It's obvious, but for somebody that's in it, they don't. Yeah. So, okay, that's a great suggestion.
Here's the trick. If you're watching this and want to ask someone that you love to get help, don't let it turn into a family fight.
Right.
Don't just ask, lay it on the table. If they say no, I don't have a problem, go, okay, and then step back. Because if you turn it into a family fight, it's going to be a topic you can never talk about again. But at least if you move forward down the road, you can say, hey, we've asked you a few times to get help and you refused. Second thing, you said, I would recommend everyone educate themselves around the disease. There's some great books out there. There's some great resources out there. That actually you can go online and learn about anything from SAMHSA to the AMA to Al-Anon to Nar-Anon. Learn about what it is you're going to be dealing with. And that leads to the third point. Start getting support from other people who have shared your experience. I mean, one of the reasons all these 12-step support groups are so successful is because everybody that has been through an addiction can understand and relate. Challenges, a lot of family members feel that no one else has experienced or is going through what they've gone through. So when you start talking about it and going to some support groups like Al-Anon, Nar-Anon, PALS, there's a number of them out there, all of a sudden you're like, holy cow, people have been down this road and it's like exactly like what I'm doing. And the cool thing, people get better and you can talk to others who are further down the road into recovery than you are and say, what did you do? How'd you get there? And that is true community and that is true healing.
Yeah, that's, and kind of on that note, I get calls and Facebook messages from people that I went to elementary school with, people that I went to junior high with, people I went to college with, people I lived in the dorms with, and over the years, and today it's, and then like watching them progress is amazing. So yeah, I mean, it's just like if you pick up the phone, if you start texting, if you reach out to people that are in recovery, that work in recovery, that are in the space, like you got to start talking about it. You got to
Mm-hmm.
start talking about it.
Yeah. The biggest form of enabling, everyone's I'm an enabler. The biggest form of enabling is not talking about it.
Pushing it under the rug.
Everyone can smell the elephant. Everyone hears the elephant trumpet, but everyone's stepping over the rug.
Right. Right. Well, Carey, this has been great. This has been some really good information. And how can people get a hold of you if they want to find out more about you, more about the services that you provide?
Sure. My website is InterventionASAP.com, which is intervention as soon as possible, but .com ASAP. We have a toll-free number, just so someone's at a payphone, if you can find one these days. 888-405-3121. I'll say it again. That's 888-405-3121.
Awesome. Awesome. Carey Davidson, everybody, thanks so much. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Tim, thank you. And I just want to end with this. You know what? If I didn't see people get better, I couldn't do what I do. And I know you're in the field, and we've talked a few times, and it's just awesome seeing people get better.
It is. Amen to that.
Let's help some people out there.
Let's do it.
Thanks.